Welcome back to another Tul World podcast. Thanks for jumping back in. I'm your host, Mr. Jew, and I'm here with Master Jew today.
How are you doing today, Mr. Jew?
Pretty good.
We just finished an episode for our Tul World Plus on X-Dance.
So if you haven't checked out our Tul World Plus program, make sure to do so. We kind of go over techniques a little bit more in depth with some video instructions as well.
Right, so not just talking. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about that X-Dance there, Mr. Jew. What is your interpretation of the X-Dance, and where did that all come from anyway?
So I had a student the other day kind of ask me about why exactly we do the X-Dance. Basically, her question was, you don't really see that usually. Like, let's say you're sparring somebody, you don't ever see someone jump into an X-Stance per se, right? And is it wrong to do any other stances after a jump?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what exactly would you say the X-Dance is? What is it for? If you look at like the pattern pole-on, there's the X-Dance.
Right.
And if you think about it, it is a technique. And all of these X-Dances are associated with some type of technique. But you also notice that there's kind of a transitional period as well. So for instance, in pole-on, when you do that X-Dance, the foot cuts across in front as opposed to in behind. When you're jumping, you place the foot behind the X-Dance, the supporting leg, I should say. And when you're moving horizontally, like in pole-on, it's in front. So it's more like a transitional position. But you're also doing a technique as well.
Right.
So when we jump, we place the non-bearing weight behind that front foot.
Right.
When we're moving laterally, it's in front. Now, when we jump, I think mostly that foot is for balance, as you set it down. Whereas when you move laterally, it's not really the case, right?
So why the difference between the two? Why one in front, one in behind?
Well, I think when you're jumping, your momentum's going forward or something, so you land on that one foot, and then you place the other foot down. And since you're generally, if you think about like natural positions, if I'm jumping with my right leg forward, my left leg is back, the tendency would be to put the foot behind it just because of the body position. So when we look at, let's say, Yulgok, right? Why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about Yulgok and where the foot is positioned and why it's in that position?
So in Yulgok, the foot's going to be pointed at like a 45-degree angle, and we're doing a side back fist strike, so we're going to be more of a side facing, but the striking hand's still going straight back to C.
Right, and that's the reason why it's at a 45-degree angle versus straight forward. Since it is a side back fist strike, if the foot was forward, then the hand would be off to this angle. But since it's directly in front, then it has to be at an angle that way, right? It's different than in Tege, though.
Tege is going to be facing off towards A, so you have to turn the body a little bit more, and you're intercepting a kick coming in.
Right. And so that's an interesting technique in itself, because your momentum is going towards C, right? You land, but your momentum is still going forward, but you're moving towards A because you're blocking towards A. So you actually have to position a body, and right when you land, you execute the technique. So you don't want to execute technique as you move forward towards C. It's a little bit different. Unlike Yulgok, what you're trying to do is trying to get that momentum forward as you strike that individual.
Right.
So two different applications, two different ways of doing it.
Well, my question is still like, why do we do an X-stand?
Besides the transitional point. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that if you think about like when you're jumping, let's say that Yulgok where you're doing the back fist strike, side back fist strike, and you jump and you, let's say, land in an L stance. Why couldn't you do that? I mean, we kick and we land that way, right? But aren't we trying to get that technique to move forward as we strike? Because you actually strike not in the air, but you're actually striking at when your foot stops. That's when Well, unlike a side piercing kick, a flying side piercing kick where you might jump up, you'd kick in the air, and then you'd land. But in this case, you're covering distance, you're striking at the moment you land. So I think for balance purpose, you want the maximum momentum forward. That the X stance would allow you to do that.
But there's nothing saying that you can't go into like an L stance, rear foot stance.
Jump, land, back fist. Yeah, I think you could do that. But again, if you just try that, right, what's going to happen to that momentum?
You gotta go backwards a little bit.
Kind of slow it down a little bit, right? So you're not going to have that not as much destruction. I think for that reason, jumping, for hand techniques, landing. Again, when you look at sparring, and you do see flying hand techniques, right?
Yeah.
So, but they're up in the air punching. They're not actually jumping, landing, and punching.
Right. Well, let us know your thoughts on the X stance and any ideas that you guys have on it. Don't forget to be safe.
Keep training.
And we'll see you guys next week.
Taekwondo.